Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me today. Alfie here has decided to join. I'm hoping he's just going to lay there and go back to sleep. He tends to start cleaning himself whenever I try to start a video. Alfie, don't you make me pause. So today I'm going to be talking about a single book. Normally when I do this, it is either like a haul, unhaul, or I talk about several of the recent books I've read. However, today we're going to be talking about one big old fat book, which is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I started this book, well, first of all, it's been on my TBR for like 10 plus years. I've been wanting to read this for a long time. This is on pretty much all the books you should read before you die list, blah, blah, blah. But I did watch the movie when I was younger, and I did want to see, what's the book all about? I started reading the book a few months ago. I got 10 or 15% of the way through, and then I just stopped reading it because I had a few other book projects I wanted to prioritize. I got them finished, and then I was able to go back and finally finish this one. Thank goodness. Like, it feels good to finish a book this length. Look at, he's like a little pile of fluff now. I love it. Anyway, this is going to be, if you can't tell by now, this is going to be a very rambling video because typically with the books, I will try to write down like a few points I might want to discuss, things that hit me in certain ways. Nope, today I'm just going to ramble about this book because that's kind of the type of book it is. There's just a lot to discuss plot-wise, character-wise, controversy-wise. Let's do spoiler alert because this, as I mentioned, has been made into a movie. It's a very famous book. I'm pretty sure everyone knows the main steps that the book takes. If you don't, maybe stop watching the video because I am going to discuss it in pretty great detail. So let's start by just doing kind of a brief run through of some of the main characters. There are a lot of characters in this book, but Margaret Mitchell does a really good job of giving them each their own voice and their own specific feeling so that when I was reading through, I never confused one of them with another, which sometimes when you're talking about epics, some of the characters kind of fall by the wayside and you go back to them 300 pages later and you're like, wait, who was that again? Where do you come in? I never experienced that with this book. Main character, Scarlett O'Hara. She is 16 at the beginning of the book, and I think she's around 28, 29 when the book ends. So this is 10 plus years of her life. We begin the book. She is kind of the definition of a stereotypical Southern belle. She is very beautiful, very vain, very superficial, self-centered. She has been taught through society that her worth in life comes from how much men desire her. She's not very educated. She cares mostly about beautiful ball gowns and how many gentlemen callers she has. She lives with her family on a plantation called Tara in the South. And her father is an Irishman. He came over from Ireland through a lot of hard work, kind of pulled himself up by the bootstraps, made a fortune for himself. Like a lot of other kind of well-to-do gentlemen in the South, he owns a lot of slaves, which we will come to. Her mother is a well-respected Southern lady who is very kind of taciturn and reserved and never loses her temper, never yells, is very much a lady. She also has, I think, two sisters whose part in the book is definitely bigger and more important than it was in the movie. And then some of the other main characters in the beginning that we're introduced to, in the neighboring plantation called 12 Oaks, there is Mr. Ashley Wilkes. And Ashley is a fine Southern gentleman, and Scarlett's known him her whole life and very much believes herself to be in love with him. She has a lot of gentlemen callers. She's kind of famous in the county. Very beautiful, flirts with everybody, kind of has all these boys at her beck and call. But the one that she can't quite get is Ashley, and that's the one that obviously she's going to want the most. Now, there's a very big party at the beginning of the book, and it is announced that Ashley is engaged to Melanie, who is, I believe, his cousin, which, yuck. But there's a lot of yuck things in the book. That's just one of them. And Scarlett is absolutely heartbroken and very much thinks that she and Ashley need to be together, and he's all she needs to be happy. And it's so unfair. Who is this Melanie coming in and kind of taking her man? Melanie is very soft-spoken and naive, and kind of in the book, she's almost kind to the point of stupidity in the beginning, especially. She's very much shown as a pushover, and it's only later in the book that her backbone starts to show. Some of the other important things that happen during this party: Scarlett meets Rhett Butler, who becomes a major character and a love interest later on. A lot of people, when they talk about this book, they define it as a romance. And the love triangle between Scarlett, Ashley, and Rhett provides a lot of the book's drama, but I would personally define it more as a tragedy. That's neither here nor there, though. So she meets Rhett Butler, who is kind of the scallywag, very sure of himself, and he catches Scarlett in a moment of vulnerability where she's lost her temper. She's confessed her love to Ashley, and it's not reciprocated, and her pride just can't stand it. So she and Rhett don't start off on the best foot. And then the last major thing that happens during this party is the war is officially announced. There's been a lot of rumblings between the North and the South up to this point, and it seems like it's going in the direction of war, but now it's kind of official. Some writer arrives and says, it's war, it's broken out, it's happening, and all the young men are ecstatic. Typically, you get the opposite when talk of war breaks out. Is, people don't want that, but in the South, the cause is under threat, and they will do whatever they can to protect the cause, and a Southerner is worth 10 Yankees, etc., etc. And it's all these young men who've never had a taste of life except privilege, but they've been brought up as gentlemen, and now that way of life is supposedly under threat, and they need to go and they need to fight for it. Scarlett herself couldn't care less about the cause. She thinks all this talk of war is tiring, and she wishes, people would focus on her more. Because the men are all marching off, there are a lot of shotgun weddings where the women don't know if the men are going to be coming back, and it was really bizarre reading about just how much fervor, and it wasn't panic where you would think, okay, people are going off to die. It was people were so proud and excited to do this. That's one thing I will say with Margaret Mitchell, she will put you in the mindset of what could have been a Southerner during that time. Is that mindset always right? No. This book, we will get to the controversial issues of the book, obviously, but it's just some of the mentality that the people would have where you think it would go opposite, it doesn't. It was very strange. Now, at this point, Ashley is set to marry Melanie, and some other guy, Frank comes later. I can't remember the name of her first husband, but someone proposes to her, and kind of in her hurt pride and her willingness to hurt Ashley, she says yes. She gets married, gets pregnant immediately, 16 years old at this point, and her husband goes off to war and dies in the war. So she is married for a week or two, and then she's a widow suddenly with a child. And Scarlett does not like babies, which same. I completely get that point. And I really liked having this female protagonist who is so unlikable, but in other ways is so understandable, where her main focus isn't like, oh, I'm gonna have so many babies and take care of them all. I love that this was written in, what, 1940 something? When were you written? 1936. 1920, 1930s women were written in a certain type of way and were focused on certain things. And I love that this really unlikable protagonist does not like so many of the things that she's supposed to. The book is really set in, I would say, like in my mind, it takes place in 3 different parts, which is before the war, during the war, and then after the war. Before the war is pretty short because, again, the war breaks out in chapter 1, chapter 2. Scarlett goes to Atlanta where her aunt lives, stays with her when the war is actually taking place. She works as a nurse in one of the hospitals, takes care of Melanie, who is pregnant at this point. All the men are gone, and it's just the women and a few of the older gentlemen kind of running things, and they get lots of lists about who has been killed, and younger boys go off to war. One of the last stands of the war is taking place right near there, and it's a very dramatic exit from the city. Melanie has just given birth and she's very weak, and Scarlett is kind of forced to step up and take care of her, even though she really dislikes her because this is Ashley's wife. And not just that, she's just a very, in Scarlett's mind, this kind of helpless, weak character, and Scarlett's saddled with her, and it's this added responsibility that she really doesn't need at this point in time. But they are able, with Rhett's help, to leave the city, and Scarlett goes back to Tara, which when she was younger, Tara was never this important to her. She took it for granted. But after the war, it becomes sort of the symbol for her. The war's gone very bad for the South, something they did not expect to happen at all. Everyone's starving. The Confederates have destroyed all the crops and killed a lot of the animals. So when Scarlett returns home, her mother has died. Her father is not well mentally, so it is up to her to kind of step up, assume the helm, and take charge of Tara and try to turn it into something that might provide some sort of monetary gain so that their family won't starve. And this is where I would say Scarlett's character kind of solidifies into the person that she is meant or destined to be. She really doesn't change a lot through the book. In many ways, she's the same character at 16 as she is at 28, but being hungry and being forced to flee for her life and having strangers take everything from her and having these impossible taxes to pay, it's like when it pours it rains kind of thing, and everything is stacked against her, and she really just kind of hardens into, I'm going to deal with what I can today. What I can't, I will deal with tomorrow, and I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to get to the point where someday I will have so much that they can't take it away from me. At her heart, Scarlett really is like a survivalist, where she will do whatever she needs to. She will turn on whoever she needs to, be as cold as she needs to be in order to survive. And I would also say that this is probably where I learned the most in the book. I'm not saying that everything in this book is facts or should be taken as such, but a lot of things that happened after the war I was not aware of. Some of the struggles that the South faced as the North was trying to kind of keep control through a way other than violence was really fascinating. After the war, Scarlett marries another man. She opens her own business, which is something that women, really aren't supposed to do. And she gets a lot of negative attention, a lot of flack for it, but she does not care at all what people think. She socializes with a lot of the Yankee officers' wives, which no good Southern lady such as Melanie would ever do. And she just kind of, in her neighbor's eyes kind of debases herself over and over. And it's so fascinating because Scarlet is so vain. And for as vain as she is, she just does not care at all how these people view her, which is so contradictory, but it makes so much sense when you're reading it. She's such an unlikable character, but she is really complicated, and a lot of the characters are really unlikable and do terrible things and treat people terrible ways, but they're complicated enough where you feel something other than outright derision for them. And I'm not going to go too much further into the plot. Obviously things happen between, you know, her and Rhett. She ends up having him as husband number 3. She has a daughter. Tragedy happens. The ending of the book, Margaret Mitchell leaves open, so we can kind of decide what steps we think Scarlet would take and if it would have a happy ending or if it would continue in tragedy, etc. The pace of the book is fantastic. Like, it's a really long book. I was expecting with books this size that there will be moments that drag or moments you might want to skip. I didn't deal with any of that with this book. Like, it seems so much shorter than what it actually is. You really just want to continue reading. It's a page turner, which really says something about Margaret Mitchell's writing in a book this size. She is a really talented writer. She's a really good writer. I think this is the only book she ever wrote. With that being said, Alfie, shall we talk about some of the negatives of the book? It is a controversial read, and I get why some people might not want to read it. The way I personally go about this is, if the author is still alive and they've done something morally that I can't get past, I won't buy the book if it benefits them. Like, if me buying the book, especially new at a store, they're going to get some monetary value from that, then I won't do that. I will get it secondhand, which is how I usually buy books anyway, or rent it at a library. Definite glorification of the South during slavery. Absolutely. Don't knock the camera down. Part of me was wondering if, did she write it that way because she's showing us that this is the point of view of someone who would be from the South, who was kind of almost brainwashed with that mentality in mind that these things were acceptable and this was a perfectly fine way to live your life and how to treat other people. I was wondering if that's how it was, if she was doing that from a storytelling kind of perspective. But then I did read something, I don't know if it was true or not, about Margaret Mitchell later in life, how in college or at camp or something, she refused to room with someone who was Black. I don't know if that's true, but there has been so much discussion on, was Margaret Mitchell really racist, or was this, like I mentioned before, kind of a storytelling aspect of the book? You're just trying to give how someone who lived in the South might have thought incorrectly, obviously, about the war at the time. The way that she writes some of the Black characters is just really uncomfortable to read. Specifically how she compares them so many times, like, to animals, or their behavior animalistic. Is that a word? Animalistic. Does that take away from your enjoyment of the book? Probably. Is it still a really well-written book in many ways? Yes. In so many other ways, it was really enjoyable. I really like the complexity of some of the characters. The pacing was fantastic. There was so much drama. There was so much happening. Objectively, I think this is a fascinating look at someone who was raised to, how do I want to put this, to kind of glorify so many of the things that the South stood for without taking into account so many of its sins. Authors can write about terrible things happening without absolving those things without saying that this is an okay thing to happen. Like, not every book about war where battles take place is saying war is a good thing. This, unfortunately, I don't think Margaret Mitchell was so angry, was going for that. I think, unfortunately, she had some issues in real life. In the end, you just have to, I think, decide for yourself. And some people aren't comfortable reading the book, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not here trying to convince anyone to read it. I really enjoyed so many of the aspects of it, and it's strange because you almost feel guilty about liking a book so much when its author was racist and did write racist things in the book. But my kind of stance is that you can take a mixed work and try and retain the good things and leave the bad, and as long as you don't pretend that the bad aren't there and aren't happening, for me, that kind of makes it worthwhile. Did I make that complicated enough? I probably. That's Gone with the Wind, guys. I am really glad that I finally got through it. I do apologize for the rambling nature of this video, but I warned you in the beginning that's how it was going to be. I'm currently reading some like wintry books, so hopefully I'll have that video up in a few weeks. Spoiler, I am reading Frederick Bachman's Beartown trilogy. I just finished the first book. Oh my gosh, it's so good. I'm going to have another really rambly talk on that. If you haven't read that, do yourself a favor, read that. I can 100% say read that one. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me for this. Let me know if you read the book, if you enjoyed or disliked anything about it, etc., etc. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you guys on my next video. Thank you. Bye.